Time for another episode of RedPill Playbook, where we talk about helping men navigate the instinctual drives that control our sexual and social dynamics. In this one, what we're going to be doing is looking at the sexual marketplace and how sexual desirability plays out in our current culture. But more importantly, we'll be covering a massive point I've never heard anyone talk about on how to significantly improve your level of sexual desirability beyond just basic stuff like getting in shape, making money, being more charismatic, etc. So this one's actually pretty interesting, I think. So I think you guys will like it. Now, if you want to support my work, obviously you liking, subscribing, hitting notifications, that sort of thing can help me out a ton. But also make sure you check out my Vanguard community where I help guys walk through these sorts of transformations that I'll be talking about here, because it's difficult to do it on your own. It really is. If you want some getting accountability, getting support, getting all that kind of stuff is really, really useful. So make sure you check out the link in the description below for the Vanguard. First thing we got to talk about is the SMV. Talk about sexual market value. And what this is really about is how appealing you are to the opposite sex. Okay, it's pretty simple, right? Guys have, they've talked about this kind of stuff pretty commonly in locker rooms and with their dudes like for a long time. It's like, that girl is, a 6 out of 10, a 7 out of 10, 10 out of 10, whatever you want to call it. And they're basically assigning a score of sexual market value to that girl. And guys have it as well, but it operates a little bit differently between girls and guys. So for women, like they say that a woman's sexual market value tends to peak somewhere between 18 and 22. And the main driver of a woman's sexual market value is their physical attractiveness, which, instinctually maybe that's tied to their childbearing ability, they look young, all that kind of stuff. Now, this isn't the only thing that affects a woman's desirability. Her personalities, her values, her, the level of compatibility you see with her, all that kind of stuff can really affect these things. But if we're going to be talking about the sexual market, then we're really talking about the whole picture holistically, right? And so that's the way it works with women. You just think about our culture today. It's like, there's always going to be a new pop star filling that young and hot slot, because as they get older, they just stop being so spicy and people stop caring so much. And this is what you see with, the guys who are completely controlled by their sexual desires. That's what they want. You look at Leonardo DiCaprio. He pretty much always just has like a super young model. And as soon as they get too old, he tosses them. So, that's just the way it works right now in our current culture. For men, it's a little bit different. While physical attractiveness and youth are, they're kind of more secondary attributes for a guy. The big driver is his financial and material status. And, according to the stuff I've read, it says that, a guy's sexual market value will peak somewhere between like between like 28 and 32, that kind of area. Like right when a guy is starting to establish himself financially and in his career and whatnot. And arguably, depending on how the guy does, how he takes care of himself, etc., it might even be later, like for him, like if he becomes, richer later, that kind of stuff. And so what ends up happening is in this current culture, the way that this sexual market works is that both guys and girls, I think, are getting screwed in a lot of ways. So guys, especially young guys, get screwed. Like guys in their 18, 19, early 20s, that sort of thing. And I think internet dating has made this worse, like app dating and stuff, because they're no longer competing against their peers for the women in their age bracket. Who they're competing with now is actually the older guys. Like they're competing with the guys who were at their sexual market peak. So for example, like back before app-based dating, women, say a college girl, she wanted to date a guy, well, she would pick a guy most likely from her school, and he'd be, relatively at a similar sort of age level, etc. But now if she opens up that app, not only is she getting matched with guys who are her same age, or she's getting matched with guys who are maybe up to 10 years older than her. And so she's a college kid, and she could either, date another broke college kid, or she could date the dude who's like 29, has got a house, can take her on a vacation to Bali or something like that, right? Like, the young guys are getting kind of screwed. And the guys at the top who are, a bit older, a bit more established, got some money, what's ending up happening is that they're grabbing multiple women. They're taking multiple women off the market. But people say, well, you got to become that guy, right? Well, what if you're not that guy yet? What if you're still a young guy? What if you're in college? What if, like, you've had a rough time in your 20s? Maybe you weren't able to really get yourself together. Like, even if you're 30, it doesn't automatically make you better. It's like you got to have the status too. And so it's like with men, it's very much like a winner-take-all sort of scenario, especially in our current climate. And the women end up getting screwed by this as well, because the young, 20-something whatever girl who goes for that older established guy, usually that older established guy, he's just interested in sex. And so what ends up happening with a lot of women is that they keep kind of going after these sorts of guys, these sorts of relationships. But those guys, they're not wanting a relationship, but she maybe is. Maybe she's not. But like, if she uses up her youth, like sleeping around with guys who are older and have no interest in a relationship with her, then by the time that she's looking to settle down, maybe late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s, late 30s, like all of a sudden her sexual market value has declined. And now, like, she's feeling like she has to settle, feeling like she's scrambling for a guy, but all of a sudden she's not as attractive as she used to be. She's not as appealing as she used to be, at least in, again, this marketplace. I'm not talking about, like, like that women are inherently less worthy of attraction, that sort of thing. And I'm thinking about all the guys out there with wives and that sort of stuff. And they're like, oh, I love my wife now more than I did. It's like, me speaking personally, that's what I do. I do. I actually like my current wife way more than the woman she was in college. But again, we're talking in mass, in aggregate. The guys who weren't able to compete because they were too young, they a lot of them just tune out. That's what the MGTOW movement is. That's what the incel movement is. And they don't really develop themselves in their 20s. They just play fucking video games and work whatever job supports their video games and their, habit of porn and maybe recreational drugs and alcohol and that sort of thing. And by the time women are actually open to them because they can't go after those high status dudes anymore, those guys are like kind of undeveloped, and like the women are unhappy with them, the men are unhappy with themselves, and they're also unhappy with the women who are now interested in them because they've spent, a couple decades jerking off to 9s and 10s in porn. And so this whole current setup right now, I think is super screwed up, and it kind of screws everybody over. What's the way out of this, right? What's the way out? Well, I think there's a piece of this that is completely ignored. I've never heard anyone talk about this. I'm not saying no one has, but I've never seen it. And I'm calling it the Monogamy Coefficient, okay? And what this is how much someone's how much they value monogamy and how that affects the way that the sexual market works for that person, okay? So if we're going to take the average woman who has today a pretty low monogamy coefficient. She doesn't really think monogamy is like that important. She's fine with kind of like hookup culture, that sort of thing. Like, she's the woman who will go for that older dude with status who has no intention of dating her, right? She will essentially let herself be used for sex, and she uses him for a fun time. And then that breeds this whole situation we're talking about. But not all women are like this. And this is very important to understand. There are women who are like, yeah, no, I'm not like, I might find, a part of me may even find what you're offering attractive. I'm not going to act on it because I want a relationship. I want to have a family. I want to have someone who actually cares about me. And because of that, I might flirt with you for a little bit, but I'm not gonna give anything up to you. We're not gonna hook up, and I'm not gonna give you too much of my time because you're a man whore. And women like that absolutely exist. So what are the things that you can do? Well, there's the obvious stuff, right? You can raise your base sexual market value. And you can do this by, getting in shape, being more successful in your job, learning how to present a more masculine, assertive frame, learning how to be more charismatic, like all this kind of stuff. Like all that's important, right? That you don't want to neglect this. Okay, a lot of guys, they're like, I don't want to compete. I don't want to have to improve myself to have, to be more attractive to women. I'm like, okay, fine. You can be an incel if you want. I think it's dumb. You can be a MGTOW if you want. I think it's dumb. I think there's a way better way to do it. So yeah, improve yourself. Even if it's not you don't have to do it for her, but you can enjoy that perk. Ideally you want to do it for yourself. You want to be a man that you admire. And this is one of the things that, I've talked about, but there's nothing wrong with creating a win-win out of it. That's one of the things I've talked about with radiant masculinity. That's one of the defining traits of radiant masculinity. It's like, all right, I'm going to become more appealing to myself, but if you also find that appealing, well then, hey, we can both win, right? So that's important. But where the whole monogamy coefficient comes in is that there are certain things that you can do outside of that that make you more appealing to women with a high monogamy coefficient, okay? So for example, you could learn how to not watch porn all the time, right? You could actually practice sexual self-mastery. Right? This is huge. A woman who is like that, who has value for her own sexuality and things like that, she's not going to be super into a dude who is a little Gollum-like hornball who has no control over his sexual impulses, right? She's probably going to be turned off by the guy who's like, oh, if you don't sleep with me on this by the third date, well then I'm done with you, right? So it's that's not going to work super well. And a lot of guys obviously struggle with this, but that's what I do. I help guys improve in this. I help guys, quit porn. I help guys develop themselves in their sexual self-mastery. If you want to get started with that, make sure you check out my Reboot Regimen guide. If you want to quit porn, then click the free guides link below and check out the Reboot Regimen. I'll get you started on that. You can also check out the Vanguard. If you want to go big time, I've got the Reforged Man course, which will 100% help you do that. And that makes you more attractive to these women. And it also avoids huge problems. These kinds of women, you think, oh, I'm going to hide it from her. Okay, yeah, maybe. And then you might get divorced later, or you might just never have sex later because she found out. This is the kind of stuff I deal with regularly, is guys like this, who they have a great woman, but they don't have themselves under control. And so even if they get the woman married, they might not be having sex with her because he doesn't know how to present himself in a dignified manner. Another one is that, like I was saying, don't go out there and engage in hookup culture, engage in essentially courtship culture. If I was single, the way that I would do dating today is I would date a lot of women at once, but I wouldn't sleep with any of them. I'll be really open, be like, hey, I'm looking for someone that I really like, and I'm going to try everyone out. And until you prove to me that you're really worth my time and energy, then you're not getting anything. You're definitely not getting sex from me. That's my special power. That's my mojo. It's you learn how to put your sexuality on a pedestal, and this kind of reverses the trend that most women are used to. They're most used to guys trying to get sex from them so bad. But if you hold your sexuality up as a prize, all of a sudden you're going to stand out in a dramatic way. But you need sexual self-control in order to do that. And you need to be bought into that. And finally, the thing that you can really do is make smart market decisions. All right. If you're a marketer, we're talking about markets. One of the most important things that you can do is advertise in the place where your ideal audience is, right? Advertise where your niche congregates, right? So if I'm selling a porn recovery course, it would make sense for me to advertise it in a porn recovery forum, right? Obvious stuff. Well, if you're looking for women with high monogamy coefficients, well, then where are you going to go to find them? Probably not a club. Okay. You know, a great one? Church. Yeah. Church. Women, Christian women, they are usually, you know, more in tune with this kind of thing. You know, really any of the traditional religions are going to be useful in that regard. You know, like whether you're Muslim, whether you are Jewish, whatever, like if you can find a conservative, like a woman who's brought up with conservative religious values, chances are you're going to be able to find that you know, that woman who is more attuned to a real relationship opposed to the corrosive effects of common hookup culture, right? But there's other ways too. Like, I'm sorry, like leftist culture sucks for this kind of stuff. So going to like a women's rights rally, probably not going to help you. Going to like Democrats for America, probably not going to help you very much. Conservative rally, very possible. I remember even, this isn't even technically conservative, but a friend of mine invited me to go see Jordan Peterson live one time. He had an extra ticket, and you know, I'm a Jordan Peterson fan, so I jumped on that. And what struck me is how many women were there. And there were a lot of like well put together women who were single. You know, they even asked that in the beginning because I think they were trying to help everybody out. But like, you know, I got flirted with a lot. And there were a lot of women there, and they were like, you could tell that they rejected mainstream culture because they're at a Jordan Peterson thing. So it's like, you know, find stuff like that. Go, you know, spit game in those places. And what you're going to find is that the doom and gloom of the sexual market trends of today, they don't hold true in all scenarios. And there are things that you can do to still thrive, still find someone, still be like, find a place for authentic and healthy sexuality. You just got to do the work, right? And I think that, you know, my hope is that this gives you guys some hope who are maybe a little despondent and unhappy with the current scene around, you know, dating, hooking up, and that sort of stuff.